Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin. We the species, I always forget that. And it's April 11th. And whoops, I'm with Claude Larson. And we've been talking a whole bunch last week, right before he went on air. Claude wrote The Power of Choice, A Teen's Guide to Finding Personal Success, which I've started to read. And I'm just going to make a couple editorial important comments now, because I've said this to Claude, and I've been saying this now for the last few years as I've engaged in the work I do with young people, and that's who Claude wrote this for, young people, middle school people, and I've jumped in and I've been doing everything I've been doing with Gen Zs and Rutgers. And I got a teaching gig at Rutgers because I engage young people, and what reading this and what she's done, to me, it's like, oh wow, because she's reaching young people, and I said this, I always say this, the young people today are going to need more help than any other generation in world history, even though they have cell phones and they have the internet. And they text and they have all these tools, they're going to need more help than ever before, because we live in a difficult world. And whether it's climate or politics or everything going on. So we're going to really plunge into this and discover this with Claude. So that's, and I'm really so thrilled with this. And I'm looking at it, I'm saying, my goodness, this is good stuff. We've got
Thank
to
you.
get it out there for young people. And my wife was an educator. We talked about this 30 years. It was a fourth grade, and she's really so aware of this. So anyway, that's been my monologue. Going back to Johnny Carson, it wasn't a comedic monologue, but it was a monologue. And I'm thrilled actually to introduce Claude. If you could do a little bio, and then we'll kind of jump into stuff.
Sure. Thanks for that, Calvin. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here. So I am, I think, just a lifelong educator, lifelong learner. I started my teaching career in 1986. So probably people watching this weren't alive yet. Some of you. I saw a lot of changes from 1986 until I retired in 2019. And at first, teaching is my passion. I love it. I love to be around energetic people who want to learn, of any age. And so throughout my career, I ended up trying things like going to the high school and being in a middle school. And I really found that middle school was my passion, because if you spoke to a high school teacher and said, what do you teach? They would say, I teach biology, or I teach English. And when you teach in middle school, my firm belief is I teach students. And their focus is very content rich. And I am like, nope, these are human beings who are in probably the hardest years of their life, because puberty is very hard to navigate. And at least as we get older, life can always be hard to navigate, but you have more wisdom and experience. But when you're 13, 14, 15, even some of the high school kids that I've worked with, they don't have a lot of experience or wisdom, and they need some caring people to help give them some guidance and direction. And some of them are getting that at home. But I will say some homes, they're very busy. They've got 2 working parents. They're just trying to get through each day, each week, get everybody where they need to be, when they need to be, get people fed, get homework done. And it has fallen by the wayside, because we do have so much now. Before we had the internet, nobody was sitting at the table with their phone. Like nobody took the phone off the wall and brought it to the table with them. It wasn't happening. And it seems like now we have this age of utter distractions. And it's becoming harder and harder for this generation, like you're talking Gen Z. It's harder and harder for them to focus and have sustained attention because they've grown up with all of these things that are distractions. TikTok, 15, your attention span is 15 seconds. That's just slightly longer than a goldfish, Twitter, I mean, you get just a certain number of characters, right? Everything is like short sound bites and scrolling through Instagram and things like that. And I found that as I was getting, into 20 plus years of teaching, it was getting harder and harder to engage students. And it wasn't because I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't because I didn't have experience or teaching skills or different techniques for bringing the information. It was because they did not have the sustained attention span, at which point I realized I was frustrated because I was not being as effective as I wanted to be. They were frustrated because I was expecting much more of them and they had no idea how to meet that expectation. Not even the ones that were trying to meet it. They were like, they could not sustain their attention, even if they were trying to, which was scary to me. And so I decided that I would focus on helping them sort of weed through the distractions and really clarify what was important in their life, which people don't take the time to do. Adults don't take the time to do it, but kids really don't take the time because now it's every 50 minutes, the bell's going to ring. And now I got to think about this. And then after school, I've got practice or I've got, their time is overscheduled and their free time is screen time. They're in the car, they're not having a conversation with anybody. They're texting their friends or they're scrolling through a feed. And it was affecting their ability to learn and solve problems, which is essentially, that's life, right? You spend your life learning and unlearning things because we first learned, Calvin, you'll join me in this generation. Remember the rotary phone? If you misdialed and your finger slipped, you had to start all over. And then it was the push button. This is exciting. And then it was, wow, this is remote and I can walk around the house and talk and I don't have to stretch the cord from wherever I was. So you had to keep learning something new. Then now you got a smartphone. You got to unlearn how to use the other stuff, learn how to use the smartphone. And it's an ongoing lifelong process. I mean, for as long as we are on the planet, the things that we have now are going to become obsolete.
Correct.
And the next thing is we got to learn how to use that. And I get it. They're making it easier and more intuitive. But young people now think that the world is as simple as if I just speak a question into either a device that sits on a table in my house or the phone that's in my hand, I will get a solution to my problems. And life's problems aren't like that, not the real ones. And so this book was really, it was about me helping my students, and it was about creating better life habits for them, because I knew that I was going to have them for this finite period of time, but I wanted them to be successful beyond that. And in order to do that, you've got to be clear on what's important to you and what isn't, because media and marketing, advertising, it makes it seem like these are the things that should be important to you. And for some people, maybe it is, but for a lot of us, the real contentment and satisfaction in life does not come from owning some device.
It's a wow. I'm jumping the gun, but I wanted to say this. When we met the first time, a week ago or so, you said something that to me that was very profound. And it was that some of the kids that you had reached were in the cafeteria, and they told the cafeteria aide how much the work you're doing meant to them. And to me, that kind of blew me away because they were conscious enough and maybe mature enough and understanding enough to realize what you were doing and how much it helped them. But anyway, we can come back to that. But that really resonated with me. That the kid.
Well, that's when I knew I had made an impact, because,
Wow.
it's one thing to they were quiet, and after I had done my little, I did these just mini lessons on Mondays, and it was like the setup for the week. Okay, we're going to start in a very mindful way, and we're going to carry these themes that build on each other. And they don't, they're teenagers, and they're in a social environment that's not the most, you're not going to trust every single kid in your class to share anything personal with, but you're going to trust maybe your best friends who sit with you at lunch or, outside of school. And when I realized they were talking to the people who had a positive impact in their life about it, that's when I knew this is getting through, because that was my whole thing. Weed away the things that are not in your best interest and cultivate the ones that are. So when I realized they're having conversations, I did a meditation with them. They were talking about the meditation in lunch.
Wow.
I was like, whoa,
That's great.
that happened. Yeah,
Great.
crazy.
I want to just jump a sidebar. I just want to I thought this would it would resonate, using that word again. But your table of contents, just to read a couple things. Your dirty mind, how's life treating you? What are you willing to do? 10,000 hours. All you need is love. That's a Beatles thing. How do you want to suffer? What is the worst punishment in the world? Walk the plank. How you do anything is how you do everything. Guilty or innocent, living large, beware of vampires, etc., etc. So, I mean, this is some really great stuff. And like I said, I was kind of looking through the in reading some of this. It's great stuff. And you and I talked before. How do we shake people and make them understand that's really important stuff, and it works. It works.
Well, and that's the thing is, having had a long career with young people, I knew what was going to get their attention and what wasn't. I wasn't going to like lecture them on, we should all say please and thank you, because I think manners are great, and I think we should all use them. However, the power of genuine gratitude, and when you feel that, like when you really feel that, when you express that to somebody, or when you receive that from somebody, that's something that, yes, their parents surely said to them, if you want something, you're going to say please, and then after you get it, you're going to say thank you. But that's not the same as instilling in them a genuine gratitude for what they already have, because they all think they need the next new thing. But if they stopped and looked at all the things they had, they'd be like, my life is full. I mean, most kids, I get it. There are some kids who live in very challenging situations, but even those kids, if they, and I had some of them in my classroom for sure, when you get them to really write down what they're truly thankful for in their life, I'm like, see, everybody has something that is positive. Even if you don't think about it often enough, these are the kinds of moments of clarity that not only I was giving as a topic for discussion, but giving them the time and opportunity to write down their thoughts. And honestly, it was an investment of maybe 15 minutes a week, which I think at that point, in that point in my career, I was kind of like, well, hopefully I'll get through the rest of the curriculum, because all of the administrators, that's all they're worried about is, are you going to cover hit all the bullet points in the curriculum. And honestly, an investment of 15 minutes on every Monday for each of my classes, I not only completed what I was going to do that week, I did it more in depth. Like my discipline issues fell away. They were more engaged, they were more polite, and we covered material with more meaning and more understanding than if I had not invested those minutes, because otherwise I would have just been battling the mindset of distraction.
Right.
And instead was pulling them in. Here's our focus. Now I have your attention, and it's gradual, it's a 10-minute activity. Then it's a 15-minute activity. Next thing you know, they've been active for 50 minutes and the bell rings and they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea that the bell was about to ring, as opposed to, and we've all been in the classroom where you're staring at the clock, waiting for that bell to ring, because you're like, how is it possible that 2 minutes have gone by? It feels like that was an hour. And that for kids, if you're trying to do something that's full length, the whole period, before you've built their attention and their ability to go that long, that's what it feels like for them. And I used to love it when like the bell would ring and they'd be like, oh my gosh, scramble, because that's full engagement. They were not looking at the clock. They were not worried about it. Time was flying, when you're in that state of flow where you have no idea that hours have gone by. And that was the power of this book. And I didn't foresee that. I started this as an experiment because I said, I'm so frustrated with their short attention span and their low frustration tolerance for problem solving. Like if I can't Google this answer,
Wow.
or somebody else won't give it to me in 10 seconds, I can't do this. Like they learned this helplessness for themselves. And so that was the power of what happened there. It was, I said, I could fall on my face. This could totally fail, but I'm going to try it anyway and give it my best shot and see if I can affect change. And when, I was only going to do it for 10 weeks. And then the kids, when I said, this is the last week that we're doing this, they asked me for more.
Wow.
Which for teenagers to ask you for more.
Wow. That's
to
great.
stay after class and thank you for doing it, because you teach this, you go through this thing right at the beginning of the period, but they'll wait till the end of the period because they're still thinking about it at the end of the period, and they would linger at the end to thank me for doing that, which was remarkable. Anybody who works with teenagers and young adults, I know a high school teacher, he taught for a long time. I want to say like 35 plus years in the classroom. And I was like, well, what's the best part about being retired? He's like, I never voluntarily have to speak to another 16-year-old if I don't want to. And I thought, ouch, but that, he was the high school teacher. He was trying to get content across and he was experiencing the same struggles I had. But his mindset and focus was on the content instead of, if you bring the kids along
Right.
with you, the journey is much more pleasant.
I'm looking at my notes. If you wanted to talk about what this means, 2 monks letting go of grudges.
Oh yeah.
So what is that?
So, and a lot of the book is really, it's ancient wisdom. A lot of it is just life skills that as adults, many of us have a handle on these. We all know the adults who don't. But the 2 monks is getting kids to understand, because, kids will hold a grudge. And I know family members that will hold a grudge, and they'll hold it for weeks, months, years, decades. Like we've heard those stories
Right here.
We might have those stories. Exactly. Right. And the story is really about the action of, there were 2 monks, and one picked up a woman and helped her across the river. And the other monk was so angry because as a monk, he wasn't supposed to touch a woman or speak to one, or, and these were the rules, right, I guess, of being a monk. And the moral of the story is really what it all boils down to is the only reason you're holding a grudge is you in the same situation would have done something differently than what that person did. So that one monk said, okay, but my heart says this person needs help, and so I'm going to help them. And the other person said, yeah, but she's a woman and you're not supposed to speak to her or touch her. So in same situation, two different responses. One's holding a grudge because he would have done something differently. In the end, that's what we do too, right? Somebody's mad at their family member because they did something in a certain situation. You in that same situation would have made a different choice. That time has passed. You can't undo it. Forgive it. Move on. Recognize it as a grudge that like and people, kids wake up every day like so-and-so did this to me yesterday and they're going to be mad at them again today and mad at them again next week. I'm like, you're carrying that around. Like that's over. The only place it exists is in your mind. If you let it go, I'm not saying, forgive, but like take the lesson with you. If somebody truly does things that are offensive, that bother you, whatever, know that they are capable of that behavior and respond accordingly, but don't carry it around with you every day. It's only hurting you. That person, they've moved on. They probably don't even know it's bothering you. So,
Lesson.
Yeah.
Okay. One quick off-topic thing. I kind of forewarned you, which has nothing to do with anything, but I always like to ask this because it's so here's the thing. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with. You don't have to answer it, or if there's a couple, it's just I throw this out because I like it.
Okay, so if I got to spend one day with anybody, I would choose David Hockney. Do you know who David Hockney is?
I've heard the name before.
Yeah, he's world famous. He's considered, I'm not sure if he was like knighted by the Queen, but he's from the UK and he has been an artist for over 50 years, like just famous, works in a museum, hang in museums, worldwide acclaim. Anything that he makes, worth millions, right? And I wouldn't ask him questions about how do you paint, because that would be irrelevant to me, because how I paint is going to be how I paint and how he paints is going to be how he paints. But he has been doing the making of art for over 50 years. He went from painting to painting abstracts to painting what was in his environment to changing his environment completely, making different paintings. Then he created this, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a framework and it had maybe 12 TV cameras and he drove the vehicle while simultaneously taking 12 images and like made these movies. Wow. So that you're seeing 12 things within the landscape at the same time. And then it was like, oh, okay, I did that. And now he's like painting using an iPad. He is, in my opinion, fearless. And I would love to get a handle on what is your mindset, because he gets it. He's in his 70s. He might be 80. I'm not 100% sure on his age. I feel like he's in his 70s though. And it's just keep evolving. Don't be afraid of new things. Try them. And that I kind of want to hear about what's the journey? What kept you fearless all these years? Because he's honestly, I mean, in the UK, he's a national treasure, but I feel like worldwide, he's just a treasure for his mindset. His art is very, thought provoking, like some of it you think it's sort of that naive art, like, oh, it's very simplistic, but then the more you look at it, you realize the actual skill involved, because it's hard to make a painting look simple. Right. But really his mindset, that's who I want to be.
Okay.
I want to continue to evolve and learn and be fearless. I'd love to spend a day with him.
Okay, great answer. Great answer. Actually, that's a good segue, because in my notes, I have here the highest function of the mind is creativity. I pulled out from what I read. So there's again, my notes: creativity, imagination. How getting involved. If you can talk about the issue of, not an issue, the institution of creativity, because I read about creativity quite a bit in my second novel, and how important it is, and if it's stifled, uh, again,
Oh,
for me, if it's stifled, if creativity is stifled, it does terrible things to you, even if you don't know you're being stifled. So you're so busy, you don't have time to pay attention to what other people are doing, not how getting involved in creative projects shatters competition. If you can kind of elaborate on those themes.
sure. So, now young people, they're very, they're way more socially aware than decades ago, right? It was, you compared yourself to the kids in your class. But now with the internet and all of the platforms that young people are on, you're comparing yourself in a much larger pool. And it's very easy to feel, I'll never be that good, so why bother? Right? If I'm never going to be able to paint like David Hockney, for example, why bother? If I'm never going to be, a famous basketball star, why bother? If I'm never going to do, if I'm never going to, make the next scientific discovery because I'm not a genius, why bother? And I think it breeds a lot of apathy. It also breeds a lot of low self-worth,
Mhm.
because kids don't realize that whatever they do, only they can do it that way. Right? Yes, that person wrote the great American novel. You want to be a writer? Then write. Nobody else is going to write what you write. Nobody's going to string the words together in the same order you put it. Nobody's inside your head putting your thoughts together. That's yours alone. And I think when we give kids the opportunity to spend time making something, and that's my big thing, make things that have never existed before. So, as an artist, I do that. I make and sell art all the time, and nobody else can make the painting that I make. And I don't worry about if it's not as, good or deemed as good as somebody else's, because they couldn't make what I made. I couldn't make what they made. And it's fine. It's all good. It all has worth. It all has a place. There's room for everybody. But if you don't take up your space, and if you don't fill it with the things that you were uniquely put here to do, that means you're shrinking, you're staying in the box, you're keeping the lid on top of the box. You want to talk about a recipe for depression and low self-worth, and that is not healthy. It's just not.
Okay. Uh, that everything you said really resonates with me. The whole creativity side, because for 25 years I sold eyeglasses, and whatever was creative was stuck, and it didn't come out. It was like a pressure cooker, and sometimes you could hear the hissing
Mhm.
of the escaping of the air, the pressure. Uh, it's a pressure cooker of creativity. It wants to come out, but it doesn't get out. Another off-topic thing, I think we talked about it last week, but that the thing behind you, that Is there a symbolism to that rope? Yeah,
Yeah, you know what? Well, I will say this. This is like maybe an odd thing for people to hear, but I love heights. I know some people are terrified of heights, but I was a skydiver for 12 years. So when that plane door, when that
you
plane
jumped
door
out
would
of
open,
airplanes?
and I was like, yes, yeah, this is great. Like commercial flight was killing me because I was like, after 20 minutes, I was like, can we get out now? So when I saw this, it's this. I mean, this is what I like about it. It looks a little risky to walk over this bridge.
Sure
So,
does.
so taking that first step, that's a risk. It's also a suspension bridge. There's a river far below. It's like maybe in the other part of this photograph. You can see that. And you're really heading into like a mist. Let me see if I tip this. Can you see it? So there's a tree
Oh,
there.
yeah, I see that.
And it's really like into this misty, very, almost looks like a cloud forest kind of environment. So for me, it's take a risk, right? Take a step, even though you're unsure what might happen, because this bridge is not exactly, engineered with cables and metal and steel and things. Take a risk, take the step, and it's okay, because with each step you get closer to what you are considering the unknown. But when you get there, you'll be able to see further than from if you just
That's so
stay on your
cool.
own side, if you stay on your own side of this river and of this bridge, and you never take a risk, you never get to see what beautiful thing might be on the other side. And when I saw that, I just had to have it. It's
Wow.
huge. It's like, I think it's like 5 foot by 7 foot. So it
Wow.
takes up
It's
a big,
fabulous.
yeah, I love it. And I designed the rest of the room around this,
Wow.
because this was the focus.
It's fabulous.
Thank
Um,
you.
I didn't learn this from you when we spoke last week, but you jump out of airplanes.
I
So
did.
I don't identify with that because I'm afraid of heights.
Right.
And when my wife and son and I went to the city to Guggenheim some years ago, it's that spiral thing.
Yes. I
Uh,
love the Guggenheim.
yeah, and we were on the fourth or fifth or whatever level we were at. And my son and wife, I stayed away from the railing to look down.
Sure.
They said, "This is so great, Dad. Come look." And I couldn't walk to the edge and look down. So
Well, the hardest thing, it's funny, the hardest thing about skydiving, these are all the bad puns about skydiving. The hardest thing about skydiving is the ground. So you got to learn a lot about flying yourself. But it's I think still to date, it's probably the hardest thing I ever learned is how
wow.
to fly yourself at 120 miles an hour.
So
I was on
you're a pilot then.
I was a I was on a formation team. So 4 of us would leave the plane together
Wow.
and create formations.
You actually did that.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, I know, because I am like this unassuming, average in every way, average height, average build, school teacher,
Wow.
most common profession in the United States is to be a school teacher. I was like, yeah, I'm uncommon, or I'm common in most ways, but uncommon in just a few. And I like risk. I love heights.
Wow.
And I think that's why I like making art, because I don't know what's going to happen next. Now, I will say with the parachute, what's going to happen next. Here's the skydive. And then at a certain altitude, that a parachute is going to open. So those were the certainties that you wanted to have. You always had a backup parachute in case. But yeah.
Okay. Oof, I can't even imagine. So the last thing to put it together is how you have 2 editions for this. You have a teacher's edition and you have the student edition. So how can parents use this book and teachers, the edition with their kids and family. So how can this be used outside of the classroom and used at home?
Sure. I honestly, I think I'm going to just speak to parents first, and then I'll address teachers because that's they're both easy. But parents, I know how busy you are. I am so thankful. My kids are in their 30s, and many of the mayhem of the teen years is very far back in my rearview mirror, but I know what it's like. You're trying to get to work, you're trying to get food on the table, you're trying to make sure everybody's permission slips are signed and all the shenanigans are happening. And it's hard. And I think it's harder for parents to come up with, how do we have these conversations? Sure, organically, certain things are going to happen in life, and you're going to have conversations so that your kids understand how you feel about things. But the real life habits that you want them to have, you have to talk to them about it. These aren't things that they're necessarily going to figure out. And this book puts it all in one place. Rather than you trying to also find the bandwidth to figure out what conversations you may not have had with them that would be beneficial. Like, here it is. It's right here for you. And the teacher's edition actually gives not only the quick, and I want to say these chapters are like 1, 2, maybe 3 pages long. They are not long. I know my audience. Teenagers, they're not going to read a 30-page chapter if they can get all that information in 3. Like, and that's why, I believe brevity is the key to good communication. Short chapters, pointed questions, because you want them to really think about it. You want them to already know the answers to some of life's hard questions, because when the problem arises or the situation arises, the better they are at knowing where they stand and where their values are and what they're willing to do to get what they want and what they're not willing to do to get what they want, the easier it is for them to walk away, to stop comparing themselves. A lot of kids will do things that are not good for them in order to fit in or to get in with a certain crowd. And as soon as they clarify, like, those values are not in my best interest, they don't meet where I want to go, it's a parent's job to help them. This is a tool to help them. The teacher's edition has like more discussion topics, as well as what they can talk about independently, or what you can help them, or guide them with. The teacher's edition also has something you could do as a group. I think of it as, in a classroom, you can do it with your whole class and bring them through an activity. And now you're talking about important topics. However, they're not divulging personal information, which is very important in the classroom, especially it's not a trusted environment. They're not going to trust every one of their classmates because they're randomly put into your room. But as a family, right there is your dinner conversation. Like, all of a sudden, if you want your kids to be, you really want to instill like what gratitude actually feels like, right? There's exercises that become dinner conversation. Rather than you trying to think them up, and it's all in teen speak. Like, it's all scenarios that young people have been in or can relate to, because that's my audience. That's my expertise. I didn't write it for, 40-year-old corporate people, because I never worked in corporate, and I never worked with 40-year-old corporate people. So, I kept to what I knew, and I've curated these down because I did this for a couple of years in my classroom. So I had more than 30 topics, and I curated this down to the ones that had the most impact, and I put them in the order where it built, because I wanted to establish trust first. I never asked students to share. I never asked them to volunteer if they didn't want to. I never read anything they wrote. It was none of my business. No, they weren't to share it with anybody else. It was just their own personal private thoughts. And I think as a parent, that's it's easier to have this conversation with them, and they are more willing to share their thoughts with you. It's also something they come away with understanding my parent cares enough to have had this conversation with me, even if it was awkward, because some of the topics, they can be, depending on where you're at, where your kids are at, what your family dynamic is, and how they're feeling about themselves in the moment. It can feel really awkward for them to try to express it. I wouldn't push them to. It's something that organically it'll come out later. And that's what kept happening in my classroom. I would do these little mini lessons, and then like down the road, something would happen and I would refer back to something that I said. And it was like this light bulb went off, click. Oh, I see. Yeah. And they were so much more mature in my room. What they did anywhere else, hard for me to say, but in my room, the way I interacted with them, they interacted with me, and they interacted with each other, evolved because we had conversations about things that mattered, not about, not about balancing chemical equations, because I was teaching chemistry and physics, not, like, does that matter? Yes, if you're a chemist, but does it matter when you're 13? No, like this is not on your priority list of topics, but, talking about letting go of grudges or how to solve. I mean, I have a whole chapter in there in like my 2 methods of problem solving, right? I talk about the horizontal problems and the vertical problems. And kids were like, this is so helpful. Like even just the awareness of what a horizontal versus a vertical problem is. Again, I just like gave it this terminology because it made sense to me. And they were like, oh, so when I have a vertical problem, this is how you go about it. And when I have a horizontal problem, this is how you go about it. And just having that conversation. And then I could say, because you talk about, you present, okay, 2 problem solving strategies. And then 3 weeks later, they're trying to do something. And I would say, are you having a horizontal or a vertical problem right now? Like, what are we dealing with? And they'd be like, this is a horizontal problem. Okay. So, it's a level playing field. It's horizontal. What are all of the ideas you have to try to solve this? Oh, this is a vertical problem. Okay. What do you need to start doing consistently and start stacking up to solve your problem? And then they needed no more direction. Oh, okay. Boom, off they went. It gave them so much independence and self-reliance, which, if you're looking for the answer to everything by searching it on Google, your self-reliance factor is probably not very high. Here, they were solving their own problems, identifying how they could solve it, and then going ahead and doing it, which, I mean, that's life, right? Life is one series of problems after another. Small problems, big problems, everyday problems, once in a lifetime problems. How are you going to deal with them, solve them, understand that everybody has problems? Like that was one of their, they always have the like, woe is me, I'm the only one going through this. They don't understand the personal is the universal. And I'm like, yeah, a million other people are dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. They're not in the room with you right now, so you think you are alone, but this is solvable. So yeah.
Listening and absorbing, just to do a wrap here, you must have seen, and this is just my assumption, and you don't have to answer this, but you, in your experience, and you must have seen as you put together Mindful Mondays and the response of these kids, these teens, these young teens, you must have seen you did obviously see the response, the energy, and the fact that you were reaching them, and their reaction. And so that energy of what you observed, and the positivity gave you the energy to do this. And I find that amazing, because I know what it takes to write, and to commit yourself, and you did that. So it's
And you know, I mean, it helped me at a time when a lot of my colleagues were complaining about the struggles of being a teacher. I cannot imagine. I actually have teachers who've been using this through COVID, and they've said how helpful it was. And now that the pandemic is over and they're back to in-person learning and the habits they've lost, it's just like an easy way to address it,
yeah,
that you don't have to, you know, because it's like I spent hundreds of hours doing, I mean, hundreds of hours. One, even my little lessons, it wasn't like I came up with them in 5 minutes. I mean, I gave it a lot of thought, but then writing the book, then you read it and then you're like, this is terrible. And you have to edit every single word after that. It's like, I've put in hundreds of hours because only because I was called to do it. When I first started doing this, I was trying to help my students, my classroom, and myself. And at some point, I just was told this needs to be a book, because if it's helping you and them
Right.
this much, it can help others. And that has always been the reason that I do things like come on and you know, you graciously have me on these interviews. I want to share it. It's important. It's so important because it's missing.
yeah,
And it honestly, for me, made my teaching experience in the last couple years so much better. And even now, when I presented to young people in organizations and groups, when I have the opportunity to do that, these are things they have not thought about, not because they aren't important, but because nobody has said, so, you know, what are you willing to do to get what you want? Because I'm like, you know, you can watch any politician and it becomes very clear very quickly what they're willing to do to get what they want. And I'm like, are you willing to do that? And they start to say like, oh, no, I'm not willing to like lie or be deceitful or, you know, do these. And it's kind of like, yeah, okay, well then, you know, and to also understand that some people have gotten rich doing things like that. I don't know. That's toxic. Is that what you want? I don't think it is what you want. But then they start to clarify it for themselves. And that's why it's, you know, to finding their personal success. Because somebody once asked me, how do you define success? I'm like, I don't. It's never once defined in that book. I don't tell you what success is, because success for you might be, you know, I really want to have a career that makes me comfortable enough to have a modest sized home and raise a family. And some people might say, I want a 30-foot yacht. I don't know if that qualifies as a yacht. I don't know anything about boats, but you know, define it for yourself and then figure out, you know, if it's going to make you happy and then how you're going to get that.
It's a great place to kind of wrap. Everybody will have all your contact information. I'm saying it now, but I'm just all the contact information about the book. I just want to thank you, Claude, for your time and your energy and your passion, and for having written this, because it means something to me in my travels and journeys with young people.
Yeah.
So
thank you for having me on. I really appreciate this.
oh, my pleasure. And I
Just
told you before we went
gotta
on
help
there,
people.
you know, come back and we'll do a panel and we could explore more. I think more people, a lot more people need to see that. So thank you so much.
Yes, happy to do it. Would love to come back.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Thanks, Claude.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thank you. Bye.